Good morning, everybody. World. It is Jim from Slick Audio. Slick Audio. Slick Audio. Mug, coffee, early morning here. And yes, it's 10 o'clock. That's early morning. Come on. Musicians are musicians, right? How to size an audio computer. Biggest question in the world. And, a lot of folks have wondered, why don't you have a sizing tool on the website? And believe me, we worked on several. And the reality of it is, you kind of can't, because it's so custom and unique to each user, your habits, your applications that you're running. When I say applications, your DAW, your plugins, your VSTIs, ad nauseum. We're more like ad infinitum anymore. So forever and ever, amen. There's going to be new stuff, right? And with the advent of things like the new Complete Ultimate from Native Instruments, having a terabyte. The new Vienna Instruments, I believe, is almost a 2 terabyte, like 1.6 or 1.7 terabytes. I mean, it's hard to fathom anymore that you have one VSTI with that many samples. When I start to think about that, it's just kind of mind-boggling. For those of us who started, I've been in this game 36 years, 1 month, and a handful of days, plus or minus. We ran 8-inch or 12-inch floppy drives, and then 8-inch floppy drives, then disc packs that were massive. I mean, took 2 people to freaking carry, and had like 10 megabyte on them, and that would be for like mainframe and which kind of stuff, but big stuff, the big deck back systems and all that. So yeah, it's just interesting for me to see how the industry has grown, and seeing the advent of the PC, seeing the advent of of Mac, and shall I say personal computing, probably be better. It's been pretty cool, and man, what a long strange trip it's been. If you're a Deadhead fan or a Deadhead, I'm not really a Dead fan. Terrapin Station, best record, but other than that, not so much. But hey, to each his own, right? I'm a Blue Oyster Cult fan, so if you can't tell by the freaking sign back there and the neon over there, and Toto, of course, and Triumph, and anyways, I don't want to get on a tangent. Let's hammer right into it, because this is a subject that is going to require some talking. So this is going to be an educational day. How do you properly size a computer? And that would mean CPU, memory, disk, etc., for what you need for your music production / business. If you're making music, you could be doing it for fun, and that's cool. You still need to know. And if you own a studio or run a studio, be it project or professional, monster studio, doesn't matter. It's still, that's a business, right? So we have a business. I have 2 businesses. We're here to not just have fun with it. That's kind of secondary. Primary, I think, is to make money. Go figure, because then you can afford to live and eat and raise your kids and all that kind of fun stuff that goes along with life. So that being said, Slick Audio fans, let's talk about sizing of a computer. So, first question that or the first comments that I always hear is, "Oh, I need a ton of RAM. More RAM the better." Well, why? So, I'm going to make a comment, and this applies to audiophile stuff as well, because I'm kind of into that. Not audiophile. You can get to a point of ludicrousy, so we're not going to be doing any audiophile stuff here. But a system, any system, I don't care what it is, whether it's audio, doesn't matter. It's as good as the weakest link. You build a race car, right? And the race car is going to be good as its weakest part, weakest link. So you build this incredible race car, incredible motor, incredible rear end of the car, and put the best tires in the world on it for the track that you're going to run, and you put a shitty transmission in there. Guess what's going to happen? Tranny's going to blow, and you're going to sit in the track, and everybody's going to go whizzing by it. So you got to build all the components equally to do the job. So, for example, if you're a race fan, oval track racing is a heck of a lot different than road racing or rally racing. I mean, everything's different. So, the point I'm trying to make with this is know two systems are necessarily alike, and it's because of the the user's tools, software that they're using. So let's try to break it down as best. I'm going to try to do that as simple and as best I can. It is difficult. This is a general rule of thumb, so I'm making that disclaimer right up front. So general rule of thumb, it does not mean that it is 100% de facto standard. Okay? Do we got that? Good. Picture. Ooh. Don't ask me where the heck that came from. I haven't had quite enough coffee yet, but I've had some. So, CPU. So we're going to talk about CPU. We're going to talk about memory. We're going to talk about disk specifically. Storage space, hard drive space. And I'm going to use the term loosely. Hard drive, could be spindle or it could be SSD. So I will clarify as need be. So here's the general rules of thumb. From a CPU standpoint, would I put an i3 in an audio computer? Heck no. Period. Would I put an i5 in an audio computer? Maybe. And the maybe is, what are you doing? If you're only doing literally a couple of tracks, 4, 5, 8, 10, 15 tracks, just a couple of plugins, really no virtual instruments per se, or maybe one, and you're just kind of messing around. It's playtime. You just want to learn, and and have a system to run for a couple of years while you're kind of getting acclimated to DAWs and all that kind of fun stuff. Work great. It would be an absolute fine fit for you. Then we have two other flavors, i7 and i9. Now, I'm not talking about the X series yet, we're talking about the K series processors. So what do I mean by that? The K series processors would be the Z370 or 390 chipset from Intel. 390 is the newest, that's what we use. So the K series processors can be overclocked. You'll see other designations like H in the end and various other designations. Usually they're power saving, notebook kind of stuff. So I'm talking about the Ks, the ones that can be overclocked safely. And so in I'll say that our base towers and racks, which would be our 2200 series as it stands today, we have an i5 K series available, we have an i7 K series available, and an i9 K series available. So in the 9th generation processor family from Intel, this is a little education for you, Intel changed the game a little bit in the processor, in the K processor structure. So in the past, 8th generation and earlier, the i7s had what's called hyperthreading. Hyperthreading basically turns one core of a processor into two, and it splits. It's hyperthreading, right? So you're threading one, threading another, very, 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 very quickly. So if you buy a 6-core processor, to the operating system, it looks like 12, and it actually does act and run like 12. And that's, I don't want to get too deep into the rabbit hole, but the software operating system, Windows 10, can take advantage of that, and the hardware is usually faster than, whatever. And again, don't want to get too deep. So in the 9th gen series, they changed the game on us. So the i5s and the i7s do not have hyperthreading in the K series. So if you buy a 6-core processor, you're getting a 6-core processor. The i9 is where they've added hyperthreading now. So the i9-9900K, for example, is a hyperthreaded processor. And a killer one at that, ripping fast. I know, I got one on this machine right next to me here. It's cool. And very fast. So that's the K series explained. So now I'm going to shift and tell you about the X series. So the X299 chipset from Intel is their Intel Extreme series. Ooh, Extreme. The point of that's basically what a Xeon workstation processor used to be. Now, don't get me wrong. Intel does indeed make a Xeon workstation W processor now, and we used to use Xeons a lot in the larger machines. Intel kind of shifted at the 8th gen, when the 8th gen regular processors came out. Intel's it was a 5th gen Xeon. Xeons don't come out as fast, so when they did that, they really made a shift, and they you know, they didn't do. Nobody was making motherboards with Thunderbolt on them, for example, for the W series processor. They're geared more for CAD, you know, and those types of applications, if you will. Computer aided drafting is what CAD stands for, if you don't know. Or you know, I mean, so they're specialized, and then of course most Xeons are meant for servers. You know, where you're getting you know, tons of I/O, and it's getting pounded by tons of users. So the operating system and the application, SQL Server, that kind of stuff, Exchange, they can kind of do their magic. And so again, wrong rabbit hole I'm going down again, but I love to talk about that stuff too. So, sleepy's in the eye. It's still early. So the X series processors are obviously as close to Xeon as possible. They are extremely fast. They could be overclocked, and there is you know, i5, i7, i9. So we don't even deal with the i5s. We deal with the i9 only extremes, and that is just because of the sheer horsepower behind it, and that's our 4200 series computers. So those monsters are super fast. So when you have mega computing power, that's the line you want to go for. So now that I've explained the two types of processors and our two basic tower rack systems, so I'm really gearing this video towards that for now. Laptops, different animal, and our little mini, it has a different purpose. It's meant for a tour bus and that kind of stuff. So memory, you have to have applications that can take advantage of memory. So what would do that? Virtual instruments. So every time you load a sample, it consumes a chunk of memory. How big is the sample? Is it a small sample? Is it a big sample? It could be the same program, in other words, the same VSTI, same virtual instrument, but its sample, depending on what you pick, could be radically different, small to large. What are you going to use, you know, from your sample library? So all these things have to be taken into consideration. So memory can really, you know, some people could get away with 16 gig of RAM at a bare minimum. I wouldn't even sell a machine with less than that in it. A laptop, a little different story. It's got a different purpose. You were doing a 2-track live recording every time. You know, I could get away with 8 gig. Don't really like to, but so, you know, as you go up to 32 gig, that's really a sweet spot for most users, especially, you know, I'll use the term bedroom, small studio kind of stuff. 64 gig of RAM when you really want to stretch your legs and start doing some, you know, some pretty wild stuff. And 128, you'll never use it. But I shouldn't say never use it. Sorry, it's going to be rare that the average user is going to use that. The power user who does a lot of VSTIs simultaneously, absolutely. Then it becomes gold. To go above and beyond 128 gig, I hate to say this, but ultimate stupidity. It's just not needed. You're not going to, at least today. I may be eating my words a year from now, but I need to talk about today because that's when you're looking at this stuff. So hard drives, the last piece. We have SSDs, which are solid state digital, so solid state disks. They're super fast. It's basically memory shoved in a little box or a little strip, and depending if it's a 2.5 inch or an M2. And then you have the spindle type drives where the platter is spun and it's magnetic, and you know, you hear all the noise in it and stuff. So my rule of thumb on hard drives, it's very simple. Your operating system should always be on an SSD. Your samples should always be on an SSD. Your data does not matter. You will not write enough data and enough tracks to really overcome the bus to be able to overcome the speed of a 7200 RPM SATA drive. I've done literally, you know, a couple hundred tracks simultaneous recording and never had an issue with a 7200 RPM drive. I use 7200. My big system over there has got 2.6 terabyte in RAID 1, which is that's half the write speed, and I've never had an issue. So take your mind off that you need it. Now, if you're traveling with the machine, it's going to go all over the place, then you may want to do SSD, because SSDs have one major advantage. Well, two. They're quieter, but you still can't hear it with insider cases. I mean, I've got literally two machines running right next to where this is being recorded, and you can't hear them. And there's platters in there, so old drives, platters. Sorry, old habits die hard, right? So that really becomes factor number one. Factor number two, and the most important factor is longevity. You literally could drop an SSD while it's running, and it will just keep going and go. Okay, that's fine. You know, what did you do? If you do that to a plattered drive, you just lost data. If not, trashed the drive. So, if it's going to sit in the studio, doesn't matter. So that's the hard drive thing. So now that I've explained the procs, I've explained my concept of memory, and I've explained the hard drive thing. Now you have to look at what you're going to do. What interface do you want to run? And obviously we know our interface types. I've had videos on this before. Thunderbolt is my current favorite. Slash USB-C, wonderful. I'm saying slash because they're different, but same connector, but they're different. But still extremely fast. You have USB 3, you have USB 2, and you have FireWire. It's dead, but I'm still going to mention it. And then you have, I'll say other. So it could be MADI, it could be, several others, PCIe. I need to keep this least common denominator, right? So let's just stick with the Thunderbolt interface. We know they're the fastest animals out there right now. That and PCIe cards. So let's just stick with Thunderbolt. It's common. So Thunderbolt interface obviously has some advantages because you can write directly to memory, RAM, and bypass some of the operations that typically would happen in every other type of interface, including PCIe. So it really does have some cool advantages. So if you have this really cool, super fast input, how many channels are you going to run? Are you going to run, 8 channels, 16, 32, 64, 48? I don't know. So this is going to play. And the reason when I'm saying that, the number of channels that you buy is really for recording. It has nothing to do with playback. You could play back, 1,000 tracks. We've done it many times through 2-channel interfaces. It's how many you're going to record simultaneously. That's the tracks you're going to record simultaneously. That's what you need to do when you're picking that interface. So let's just say we have 24 channels. So 3, I'll pick on Personas today. Rick Knockvey, you're a great guy. So let's just say we had 3 quantums daisy chained together. So 24 channels, right? 8 channels, 8 channels, 8 channels. So we've got this just whopping, Larry Holmes fighting monster. I have to say Holmes. I'm from Easton, so Easton assassin, baby. So if you have that kind of an interface and you're really going to be chunking down, that kind of number of tracks, but you're just going to be recording, I'm just going to say microphone, no plugins, just straight up recording. Now, I'm not talking about playback yet. I'm about recording. Then, you can easily with 24 tracks Thunderbolt interface get away with 32 gig of RAM, and you could easily get away even with an i7 processor, the 2200 series machine that we have. And from a disk space, I already told you, what I feel about that, so I'm not even going to touch the disk. It should be SSD, OS. I'm repeating it one last time. Done after this. SSD for sample, and then does not matter for the data drive. So as long as you're following that general rule of thumb, that thing's going to purr and run like a mama. Now, I've got other performers that have 2-channel interfaces that let's just say Thunderbolt again. I've got a little mini Thunderbolt sitting here. Sorry, I keep rubbing my eyes, guys. It itches. I have allergies. I walk outside, I scratch. But they're running a ton of virtual instruments at a time, and that is where you start feeling a lot more pressure. So now I'm not so concerned about that audio throughput coming in through the interface, because really they're going to be attacking that via MIDI through the interface. So it's not really audio at all. They're MIDI. So I mean, we're talking a near instantaneous, speed of light, kind of stuff. So, Vienna Instruments, it's beautiful, but it's a hog. It's a memory hog. The samples are very large. Native Instruments Contact, for example, there's tons of samples. Spectrasonics Omnisphere, freaking love that application. I love all of them. So East West, I mean, these are all plugins VSTIs that will consume a lot of CPU power and a lot of bandwidth, inside to the memory, and it will consume a lot of memory. So that's when you got to start going, i9 time, probably i9 Extreme time, and you want to be running at least 64 gig of RAM with that. So I'll say between 64 and 128. If you're doing a lot of VN instruments, that kind of stuff, where there's, let's say you're going to run 20, 30 samples at a shot, you should have 128 gig of RAM, and that will crank. I've got a customer right now just emailed me yesterday, and he's running East-West, and he is running 40 simultaneous, I can't remember if he said I think it was, he's running 40 simultaneous instances of East-West plugins, and it's not even breaking a sweat. This is our 4200 series, by the way. And not even breaking a sweat. He said I could easily run 4 times that. 120 instances? Woof. I think he could get away with that live. Hey? It's a Canadian thing, and I'm not Canadian. I'm from Pennsylvania here. I'm not picking on the Canadians, by the way. I got tons of Canadian friends. You really look at that and you say, geez, there's so much horsepower in that machine. Well, why do I need that much? Well, why don't you need that much? That just because you're doing one thing today, you're going to be learning and then moving yourself forward, and we all know this stuff isn't going to get any smaller. It's only going to get bigger. It's the nature of the beast, right? Moore's Law, Intel, doubles processing power, etc., doubles every year and a half. Is what it is. If you don't know who Moore is the guy who started Intel, and it's called Moore's Law. Look it up yourself. It's not my education point. So I think you have a general idea just from what I've said on what to do. Now, there's one more thing I'm going to touch base with the X series procs versus the K, just briefly, and I didn't mention it before, and I should have. So there's these things called PCIe lanes. I can talk. I need more coffee. So in a standard K series processor, there's 28 PCIe lanes. In an X series processor, there are 44. So I'm going to say roughly double the amount of data that can be pushed over to memory, CPU, the bus. Let's just call it the bus, simultaneously. And so therefore the throughput is in an order of magnitude, guys. When you add more lanes, and each one is it's a logarithmic calculation. If you don't know what that means, look at that cup. So I can't help it. I'm a double E, electrical engineer, and math is kind of one of my things. So when you start to look at that, that means it's growing exponentially. It's not a linear curve. So in other words, you keep adding one and it doubles. You add another one and that doubles. It doesn't work that way. It actually is a very, very sharp logarithmic curve when you start adding more lanes. So those X series procs are mega powerful compared to the Ks. I'm not saying the Ks aren't. I'm running a K on my main machine that I'm running here for my business. And yes, I do some audio stuff and even some mastering on it and the like. And it'll rip through a crap load of tracks. But my big machine over there is the X series processor. I mean, it's plus we get to test it out on stuff out on both machines. So I hope that helps you understand what you're doing. Plugins are going to be the same as the VSTIs, guys. You don't have samples to load, so you don't have to worry about the disk load from that standpoint. But plugins can vary so radically. So if you run an HDX, for example, I mean the HDX cards have built-in accelerators. So when you're running plugins, true HDX Pro Tools plugins, the DSP on the cards, the HDX cards themselves, are going to do the processing power, and the same goes for universal audios, whether it's a satellite or I run the Octo 2 PCIe card, mine, that is offloading, the horsepower from the CPU. It's stealing away and saying, hey, CPU, you do other stuff. I'm going to handle the chunking, if you will, of chunking of all the power and processing power for your plug-in. All of it, most of it. And it really frees up your system. So those types of things are really cool. Antelope Audio's got a really killer one coming out. It's actually out now, and we're going to be announcing some stuff here very shortly with a partnership between Antelope Audio and Slick Audio. So there's some really cool stuff coming down the pike. But anyways, I don't want to get into that quite yet. The whole purpose of this video is for how do I size the computer. So, if you're running tons of plugins, run your plugins smart. For example, reverbs. I use a lot of convolution reverbs, which are way more horsepower and memory intensive than is I'll use a standard reverb, like an out-of-the-box general, I don't know, even the lexicon reverbs. Their convolution reverb uses a sample to calculate on the fly a space. And that is, it's very complex mathematically, and it's very CPU intensive. Again, remember, CPU does math, right? Ones and zeros all the time. So it really does work different. I know, sound effects, guys. If you're running convolution reverb, let's say on a drum kit, don't run an instance on each drum, the snare, each tom, and that's crazy. You're not using your resources right. You want to create a bus, a group track, depending on what DAW you're using. So that bus or group track, that's where you apply that particular plugin. So you've basically taken 10, 12, 14 potential plugins and narrowed it down to one. It does the same thing. Actually, it's going to sound better, cleaner, because it's sounding like the entire kit is being played in the room, which is the purpose of the reverb to begin with, to simulate a room space. So, they're the types of things and tips and tricks that we'll be doing more videos on in the future. You got to work smarter, not harder. When you're working with VSTIs, freeze the damn tracks. Once you have your sounds, especially in a live situation, freeze it. It unlimits or unloads, and all the unessential BS from the computer, and lets the computer run more efficiently, which means you can run more live. So you run smarter, not harder. So I'm assuming that you're going to be doing that already, and so that is a general sizing. So I'm going to make this one last statement, and I'm going to say if you're doing the 1 to 20 track range, an i5 will probably work fine for you with roughly 16 to 32 gig of RAM, depending on the types of plugins and that you're running. I didn't say virtual instruments, I said plugins. And again, disk-wise, for that kind of stuff, single SSD or 2 SSDs, fine. When you get above the 20 track level and you go up to, let's just say, again, random number here, guys, 100, 120 tracks, i7, great processor to deal with. Assuming that you're using a moderate amount of plugins and maybe a couple of VSTIs. Great machine, great sizing. Memory-wise, should never be less than 32 gigs. 64 is a sweet spot. Mwah. If you want to do 128, have a time, but I think you're overkilling it at that point. Actually, I know you're overkilling it at that point. Now, if you're doing above that and VSTIs are a big part of your life, then you should be looking at our 4200 series, which is the X series processor, i9, and don't even look back. Yes, it's a little bit more money. It's not a lot more money. It's a little bit more money, but it's an investment. You're making an investment in your studio. That computer is no different and actually is as important as your converters, your I/O, the instruments that you play. Remember the race car, it's as good as the weakest link. I could have a $7 million, golden, frickin' guitar and plug it through the cheapest interface and a POS computer, you know what I mean? And what do I have? I have garbage. So, it's grade in and garbage out, and if I have a $2 guitar that sounds, the intonations way the hell out on, and I have the best system in the world, now I got garbage in it, which is going to still make garbage out. So, weakest link. You need to think about the weakest link. So, if you're going to spend all this money on all the equipment, I want the best converters in the world, I want this, the best of that, well, you better be putting the best computer in, which is a Slick Audio. Period, the end. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. Try it. Try the machine. If you think that an Apple can beat it, send in your tests. Tell me exactly what you're running. We'll duplicate it, and we'll beat your butt. Guaranteed. I'm not going to say guaranteed your money back. That's not going to happen. You buy it, you buy it. But we will make sure that it runs. Guys, it runs. Trust me. So, anyways, we will be at NAMM. I hope that helped. I hope it gave a general, sense of what you needed, at least to get started and give you ideas. Call us. We can help. You can chat with us online as well. When we can help kind of customize. Tell us what you're running. It is very important for you to tell us what apps, what plugins, what VSTIs, how you're doing what you're doing. Number of tracks recorded simultaneously, playback tracks, etc. It is very critical to know that, to help you pick the best one. I don't want to oversell you. I don't want to undersell you. I want to sell you what's going to fit your needs today and tomorrow, not 10 years from now, because you're going to have a new machine. Technology is going to advance. The software is going to be pigging out, way more, and you're going to probably be replacing the machine in 10 years' time, 8 years' time. So, and it's not because it'll fail. It's an electromechanical device. It could, but in general, remember Moore's Law doubles every year and a half. So again, hope that helped. We will be at NAMM next week. Yay. Booth 327, I believe. And it's a fantastic spot. We're going to be near our Personas friends and a whole pile of other great companies and friends. And the NAMM shows really are to the exhibitor. It's a family event. We go and we see people that we see twice a year, summer NAMM, winter NAMM, and it's really cool to understand that we all have the same general thing in mind, and that's to help you, the musician or the producer or the engineer, put out some good music, because we want to hear it. We play and we want people to hear it. So that's the whole point of this, is to create some good music. It's not to see who has the best toy on the shelf, It's to make the best music possible. That's what this whole thing is all about. So just keep in mind, keep your eyes on the prize, and that's the song. It's not how, I have the best, gear in the world and nobody can beat my studio. Come on. That's crap. Somebody's going to beat it tomorrow. It is what it is. Just best song, eyes on the prize. Hope it helped. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, safe weekend. If you're in the Nashville area, please come into the NAMM show. Visit us at booth 327, and boy, we'll have a hell of a good time. It's good stuff. Have a good one, safe one. God bless. Cheers.